So I'm going to keep going. One day I will sort out the comments. I have had comments working before, but it's not. So I'm going that it's all working. Okay, so I've got some really super questions today that I want to go through. Good chance I won't get through all of them. So if I don't get through all of them, I'll cover them next week. I've also put up in some comments to do in the discussion to do with the Facebook Live. I've popped up a couple of videos and some photographs that I'm also going to be referring to as I talk. Okay, so first question is a great question from Kath Knoll. She asked me, I'd really like an explanation of round penning, what it does, and why we should do it. Okay, so in a nutshell, why we should do it because I actually think it creates a really good square one. And remember that whole concept of like establishing a starting point, that's square one. And I really think that round penning is able to do that really well. So I think it's a good starting point for just not establishing a relationship with a horse, but relationships are established on communication. And this is where I start having a conversation with a horse, is in the round pen. So what it does is that it shows the horse that this is me, that I'm important, and I try to communicate with it, and this is how I do it. Okay, so it's this great introduction to a conversation with a horse. So why should we do it? Well, you need to start somewhere. If you're going to start training a horse and talking to it, you've got to start somewhere. And I really like the round pen because the horse is at liberty. It's just restrained by the sides of the round yard. And then what you're doing is with your body, you are working the horse based on inherent anatomical kind of zones within the horse. So you're working on what's known as the horse's drive line, okay, which is if you're a horsemanship person, they talk about drive lines. And if you're associated with cattle or other kind of stock, they talk about the point of balance. And what that is for an animal, if you imagine a horse and you imagine where the girth sits on a horse, just behind the elbow of the horse, that line there is known as the drive line or point of balance, as I said, if you come from cattle or other stock. And what that means, if that animal, if a horse or other stock, if they feel pressure behind that line, they'll go forward. They're triggered to go forward. It's just an inherent trait of being a prey animal. They'll go forward. If they feel pressure come in front of that line, they'll turn. Okay, so they've got these things within them that can be triggered. Also, all stock animals, horses, cows, whatever, they have what's called, what we describe as a flight zone, and it's the distance from them where they'll get worried about pressure being applied. So when you work a horse in the round yard, yes, you got it contained within this space. The horse is free, but you're asking them, you're communicating to them to do very, very simple things. Okay. And my way that I do is very simple requests. I don't make round penning very complicated at all. It's just, first of all, go forward in the direction that I say. Okay. Do upward transitions. And as the round penning goes on, I will also instigate some downward transitions as well. But to start with, I just worry about them learning how to do an upward transition. Then, and I do that by placing my body and my pressure behind the drive line. So what that does is that just makes it really easy for the horse to learn, okay? Because I'm touching on things that are inherent to them, they learn that going forward a bit easier than if I had all contraptions attached to them. They're free, and I'm working on these inherent pre-programmed zones inside them. Okay, so go forward by standing behind the drive line, by putting pressure behind the drive line. And then I trigger, I want the horse to learn to do an inward turn to me. And then I get them to learn how to rest with me. So they're very, very simple things. First of all, it's like go my way in the round yard, do upward transition, do inward turn, stop and rest. Really, really simple. And there's nothing on them. And I'm triggering and applying pressure to certain things that are inherent to them. So it's easy for them to learn. So that's why I think it's a very, very fair starting point. In my belief, because you're just working on zones within the horse, There's nothing attached to it. So you're not starting with, if you start with groundwork or lunging or anything like that, the horse has to cope with all this pressure being applied and pulled and restrained on its head. Okay, and also you're impacting on its balance. In the round yard, it's just a space. They're at liberty and they're just allowed to move. And I don't care how they're doing that. Okay, to start with, it's very raw but very simple. And so it's very, very simple place for the start for the horse to learn. So what happens in the round yard, as I said, the horses learn that you communicate with them. They learn it there and they learn simply and they're able to get really good at it. So simple things that if you give a horse time, that they learn how to navigate that. Okay, so they learn how to learn. It's also the introduction to the horses, how this is how I communicate with you. I give you a signal, I give you a warning, and then pressure can come. But if you learn to go off there will always be something I do before I start warning or applying pressure. Okay, so horses learn how to learn in here. They learn how to work you out. And over time, and because you have this introduction, when you start giving them something new to learn, which you be very careful. So what I do, I have a very stepwise process of just adding on simply two things. So round penning becomes simple groundwork. Okay, so it's still doing the same things, asking them the same way, but instead of having walls, I actually put a halter on them at that stage. But it teaches them, it gives them an idea about what you're adding on, so it doesn't overwhelm them. So that's why I think it's a really good place to start. It's like they learn how to learn. They kind of get it. They start getting familiar with how you communicate with them. So they're on the lookout for it. Okay, so it's a really good place to start. A very good place to start, as I said, all relationships. It doesn't matter what the relationship is, if it's with another person or whatever. The basis of that relationship is communication. All right, so it starts that conversation happening. So that's cool. The next thing it does, which is why I think it's a really good place to start, is it has a positive physical impact on the horse. Because if you're dealing with either a young horse or a horse that what I call is being rebooted, so one that has been started previously, but it's got some problems, so you're starting it from scratch. What it does is that the round pen, because there's a lot of movement involved in it, it's really good for establishing their fitness. Okay, it also allows them time to be able to develop their balance. Okay, there's a lot of horses, just say, especially a lot of pony breeds, and just say if you're dealing with standard breds or anything like that, that canter's not their thing. It's they don't do a lot of cantering. They might do a lot of big trotting. Okay, that's more their thing. They'll be big trot or gallop. But this whole canter thing, they don't do a lot of cantering. Okay, so what it does is it lets them clock up kilometers and let their balance develop within those gaits that are not necessarily just their thing. So it's allowing all these things to happen physically and to help them before you go put someone on their back. Okay, so you get to do a lot of conditioning of them in terms of fitness and balance wise before you go disrupting it even further by putting someone on their back. The next thing it does is that I believe it has a physiological and a psychological benefit to it. Like I call it, everyone, if you know me, you know that I talk about something that I call canter therapy. And it's that whole thing of dealing with a lot of stress and anxiety with horses, of getting them to do quite a bit of cantering. It helps them breathe. It helps up with their stressed and chronically stressed. Those horses will have a lot of stress mediators in their system, cortisol and adrenaline, and their nervous systems can be very, kind of stuck on when they're chronically stressed. So it gets horses to be able to use up, or actually be able to like use up this extra cortisol and everything that's in their system to actually use it for a purpose. Okay, and then what it does, because they do a lot of canter work and then they come down and you do a lot of resting with them, it actually it's very, what I believe is very good at shutting off the nervous system from being overreactive and helping with their chronic stress. Okay, and you'll actually see, so there's a little video that I've put up associated with the event. I've put up a YouTube video of a horse before and after, horse with generalized anxiety, before and after I started working with that little horse. So that horse was in a really bad state mentally. Okay, it had what you'd call, you know, generalized anxiety, or some people would label that as ADHD or something like that, or chronically traumatized. That horse was just, it just wasn't really present. It was just, it was chronically stressed, and it had left the building kind of mentally. And you can see that after just a couple of days of just leading it and just round penning it, the complete change in that horse. So I'm going to refer to that video probably a few times in this particular live, but please watch it and see it. And that's the horse before or after. You can just see the horse is just doesn't even know it's really even tied up. It's just such in really a state. You know, you can say generalized anxiety, you can say ADHD, you can say learned helplessness, you can say all these, like a training neurosis. It had just wasn't, his mind was just, it was just being reactive. It was just anxious, and it just wasn't anywhere for 2 seconds. It was, you know, it wasn't present. It wasn't there. It was, you know, just not being able to focus, anything like that. And so you can see from that video, just only a very short space of time, how much that horse changed. And that was all done through round penning. Okay, that's round penning. And of course, I trained that horse to lead because I had to get it from its paddock to and from the round yard. Okay, so that answers that in a nutshell. Oh, finally, there's some other benefits to round penning. So when I'm coaching people, I like teaching them to round pen first. Okay, why? Because it teaches you that timing, feel, and balance. Okay, from all the decisions you've got to make, but also because you're working on these inherent zones within a horse, with drive lines and flight zones and everything like that, and you're having to, like, you know, you're creating this feel, this live feel. And as you know from the last, if you listen to my last live, and I do recommend that, I talk about timing, balance, and feel. And I talk about how you just don't switch on and off with a horse. Okay, it's, you have this, you're creating this live connection to this horse where you're alive and you're directing it, you're with it. Okay, you've got to be with it. And that whole thing about being mindful and present, it's something that doesn't turn on and off. Okay, you're there. So what the round penning process does is I believe it teaches people this. It gives them that experience about how, you know, you're asking the horse to do something. You've got to kind of do it yourself on the inside, but you've also got to be aware of your body. So the first lesson when people go in there is that I'm teaching people to feel that drive line. Okay, so, and people, they get, you know, it's very confronting. And you guys that have done that with me, you know, that first confronting thing, how I made it look really easy, and then you stand in there and you're tripping in front of the drive line, and the horse is starting and stopping and losing it, and how hard it is to keep your body on that, just that little bit behind the drive line, because you can't get too far behind because you end up coming in front. You can't get in front because you shut the horse down, and this effect of this drive line. So it makes people very aware of themselves for the first time. So all those things, that understanding that you got to keep yourself alive when you're working with that horse, how you got to have this body awareness, and then how you got to present yourself, how you communicate to the horse. You present a cue or an aid, you warn, you back it up, and every single one of those qualities is what transfers to everything else. Okay, it doesn't matter whether you're going to groundwork or under saddle. Those principles you learn of keeping that life in you, that presence in you, okay, dialing yourself up and down with energy, okay, and presenting your cues and following through and backing up, that consistency, that self-awareness, that presence that you got to learn how to have, that all teaches people in this place in the round yard, where it's you know, it's simple and it's also reasonably safe. Okay, so that's why I recommend the round penning process, teaching a horse, but also teaching the person. It establishes the foundation, the square one, the starting point for absolutely everything for horse and human. Okay, now Beck had some great questions. Okay, so this is some specific round pen questions. Is, first of all, how do you get them to move out but not increase speed, such as in cut corners, etc.? So what some horses can do when you start is they'll start cutting the round pen off, and sometimes they'll cut it because they're drawing towards another horse or something like that. They'll start cutting corners, or they'll run into you and stuff like that. They won't stay on the outside. So that was the first question. So how do you fix that? Okay, so you fix that first of all with your presence. Okay, and that whole thing about having the life in you. Okay, because I don't get horses doing it to me a lot. Why? Is because I'm in there, this my round pen, and I'm believing when I'm there that I have got presence that's keeping them out, and on that track on the outside. Okay, so I tell people you got to believe you got magic that pours out of you this way. Okay, and so when I round pen, as I teach people, the horses on the outside, you walk a little circle on the inside, keeping yourself behind that drive line. And as I walk, I'm walking with presence and the belief that that horse has got to stay out there. Okay, stay out there. So that's the first thing. So increase your life a bit, increase your presence, walk tall, walk proud. Okay, and believe they're going to stay out there. That's tip one. The next tip in is if they cut in, what I do is I'm very strategic with my asking them to canter. Okay, so they cut in, I will quickly ask them to canter, or maybe they're cantering, I'll ask for a gallop. Okay, but what I'll do, I'll present a cue, an award, and a whip flick very quickly. Okay, and so what that does, I'll make sure that I give them a touch with that whip. And so the horse learns, and I just do that consistently, and they learn because I'm saying, this is my space, you stay on the outside, this is my space on the inside, that they quickly work that out. So if every time they do that, I consistently just ask them for an upward transition, and I just put my cue, my warning, and my whip flip pretty quick. Because normally what you can do, a horse will do it in the same spot, so you can be ready for it. Okay, and you just ask them to do that upward transition there. So I find that's pretty effective. Normally I'll only have to do if I've got a horse that does it like chronically, like they've learned how to do it to someone in the past. Because I said normally I don't have a problem because of the presence and the confidence and the magic, okay, that I send out to the horse, and the belief they're going to stay out there. But if they do it, normally I only got to do that correction a couple of times, and they keep out of my space. Okay, now Beck had another good question. She actually posted a really awesome video of her horse Tough, um, her horse Tough, looking into her and giving her like a bit of a head shake. So he'll go around. You'll see in the video he's going around round penning, but then he starts curling his head around and looking in at her. Okay, and she says, this might just be my special horse, but he sometimes turns his head in to look towards me while still going around. So what should I do when he does this? Okay, so she's put up a video of it, and it's absolutely gold. Thanks so much, Beck, for posting that video, and everyone should have a look at it, because what that is, that's actually the horse having a bit of a training effect on you. Okay, they're having a bit of a, so what they're doing is when they do that, doing that, and you've got to be a little bit careful of it, because horses that do this, they're saying, come on, I want to come in, I want to stop. Okay, so what I do and how you fix that is that if they do that to me, I just ask them for an upward transition. I do the complete opposite. Okay, so if they're asking to come in, I'll ask them to keep going. Some people can fall into the trap. You've got to be very careful when they do it. They'll stop them. They'll say, oh, you want to rest? Okay. So then the horse, the horse goes, okay, when I want to rest, I'm going to tell you, or I don't want to keep going. Come on, I want to stop. But the unfortunate thing when that happens is that there are a number of horses that can escalate to a charge. Okay, if you don't let them stop, they'll get a bit disgruntled about that, and then they can actually be aggressive towards you. So that's why when a horse does that, I'm listening to it. Okay, and I make sure that I'm never flogging a horse to death in there. In fact, round penning, I say, has one big rule with me, is that the horse rests longer than they move. Okay, so round penning sessions shouldn't be all that long. I say 30 to 45 minutes max, and the sheer majority of that is doing nothing in the center, because it's hard work in the round yard. Okay, so when a horse does that and starts snaking its head or looking in, they're saying, I want to stop, and they're trying to see. And some of them have learned that if they've accidental learning that when they do that, you rest them. Okay, so they start doing it more and more. And that's why you got to be very careful. And when they do it, ask them to just use it as a consequence to go, oh, you want to do another upward transition? Okay, and then what you do is when they stop doing it, then you rest them, because you've got to remember this, that when we work a horse and when we're forming this team with a horse, this partnership with a horse, that it is a partnership and it's equal, but we both have different jobs. Okay, there's different roles within the partnership. It's the human's role to make the decisions, and it's the horse's role to do the movement. Okay, now that means that the horse can't interfere with us or start having thoughts, okay, that start trying to influence us, right? But we also can't impact on the moving. It's a fair relationship. But we do the thinking and the decisions and call the shots, and the horse performs the movement. It's fair and it's equal, but we both got two different jobs. Now, part of making the decision is you've got empathy for that horse. You are watching and observing and making sure that you're being fair to that horse at all times, and you're making decisions for that horse. Now, when that horse looks in, it might be saying, "Hey, I want to have a rest." That's cool. We note that, but I'm going to make that decision about that. I can't let them start thinking that they're making decisions. And that whole concept of allowing a horse to kind of make a decision um, actually is what creates a lot of trouble with people and horses, because we're creating a partnership, but we've got two distinct jobs. They're equal and just as important. We can't interfere with them and interfere with them doing their job, but we're the person that makes a decision, and it's fair. And when it's like that, it works. Okay, and you can get harmony going within that partnership. When you're impacting on their balance and they're moving, and when they're having and they're kind of thinking they can have an opinion about something, that's when you get conflict and a clash. So that's the kind of another benefit. You establish all that in the round pen as well. So I hope those have answered your questions. Okay, so I kind of put all these questions in order to kind of flow. So they are a little bit of out of whack with how they were presented. But please, if I don't get to your question, I will get to it next week. Okay, now once again, I'm so sorry. This is where I would pause and just say, has anyone got any questions? So I'm very sorry, but my comment section is just got the little ball swirling. So I'm really sorry. So sorry about that. So I'm going to move on. Okay, question 2 is a good one. Hi, Shelley. I'd like to know if I can do too much groundwork with a young horse. She's very green, and I like to lunge her free before each ride for a few minutes. But I don't want to be putting a negativity on it if I'm overdoing it and possibly annoying her. Okay, so you got to remember there's some rules. You got to remember that every horse only has so many circles in it before it's detrimental, and you got to remember that. Okay, so you got to use those circles wisely. So you just don't use them. You just don't do them for no purpose at all. So you've got to use them wisely. So you use them when you believe there's evidence the horse needs it. Okay. Um, but you've got to start getting to the point where you've got to be strict on yourself for that. You might just have this little safety routine that you go through, and you always just want to send the horse around. I want you to start looking at that horse and being honest. Is the horse showing any problems with doing this? Is it showing any anxiety or angst? Is it? And just be really, try to be very honest with yourself. Is this horse giving me any orange or red flags that I can't just get on it now? Okay. And what I teach people to do is when you transition, just say you just can't have groundwork as a safety blanket. You can't. You've got to be progressing on for that, because as I said, you got to use your circles wisely. Now, what Renee's doing here, at least she's free lunging her, which means she's round penning her. So the circle's not as small as a groundwork circle, so it's not as impactful on the joint. The circle's a bit bigger in the round yard, which is better. Okay, but still, you got to just again ask yourself: are you just got a security blanket going on, or are you going to be using these circles being used wisely? Okay, now if you get to a point when you go, actually, no, my horse is showing that it's perfectly, absolutely cool, and you've ridden it consistently for a number of days and it's been good, like you've got all this evidence the horse is good, get on it and do what I recommend when people transition from groundwork just to getting in the saddle, is learn the beauty of the figure of eight, the little figure of eight. Okay, so what I do is you go from doing groundwork, getting on, to getting on, and just starting with little figures of eight, just little figures of eight, and making sure the horse gets with you in those little figures of eight. And that's normally how I transition people off groundwork. So they get when they get in the saddle, they've got this little process they can go through to get the horse with them. And also the little figures of eight, they actually have they're kind of restraining, so the horse just isn't loose enough. You're putting them on the figure of eight on the pattern, and you're using the pattern for that kind of security containment for yourself. So you got to remember, and as I said, You've only got so many circles in that horse. Use them wisely. So just make sure you're not having a security blanket, that you got clear evidence. Now you might just, the horse is green, it's unbalanced, it's got to warm up, it gets a little bit nervous at the start. You just got to be, as I said, honest with yourself. Are you just doing it as a security blanket? Do you have evidence that this is the best thing to do? You know, when is the right time to transition to getting on and doing some figure of eight circles, etc. So that's my answer to that. You just use your circles wisely and with good evidence for doing so. But if you've got evidence, do it. And if you're free lunging in the round yard, that's best place. That's better than having on the short little groundwork circle. But make sure you're doing them for a fair reason on the horse. Okay. So a good thing that I'd probably recommend for you, if you're going, well, I'm not sure, actually they are pretty good, ride the horse for a number of days in a row. And if you're having good ride, good ride, good ride, good ride, excellent. That next day you pull it out and the horse is looking pretty good and you're going, ooh, should I, shouldn't? Give that a go to get on. And start just with the little figures of eight. Okay, start there. Okay, question 3, moving on. So again, sorry, no comments still, but please put them up, because I will come back and I'll look at the comments afterwards, and I will write back to you. So please feel free to write a comment when you think about it, and I will get back to you. Okay, so next question. What advice do you have when dealing with separation anxiety in situations where horses experience constant change and trauma, such as rescue situations in large rescue operations, where their herd mates constantly change due to behavioural issues and adoption of herd mates? They must have vet procedures performed shortly after arrival, and they are coming from unknown trauma situations from possibly multiple auctions, etc. I did find the info in your new course. So Karen here had actually done my course on separation anxiety that I've got available now. And she said that was really helpful, especially with the stats of how many horses in the wild field are emotionally balanced. Okay, there's only so that are emotionally balanced. There's only a small number of horses that truly have great sensory soundness, as I explained, and have very positive kind of herd dynamics of being able to process stress themselves. And there's a portion of horses that are quite bad at it. And just naturally, because that's how all a herd knits together, is all these varying of qualities of herd dynamics. And if you have a look at that course, you'll learn all about that. So in the rescue herd, she believes there's actually very few that are actually emotionally balanced. They might have been before, but they're no longer. Okay, so how do we deal with the separation anxiety and these really stressed out horses, which if they were emotionally balanced to begin with, they're normally not when they come into that situation. Those horses are typically in a very bad state, and they probably were the more difficult horses just naturally anyway to have ended up in that particular situation. So I really have a lot of respect for people that take on rescue horses and help them out. These horses can have work and can become good, but when they come into these situations, they can be in a really bad place. So you're dealing with horses that are in a very bad place. Similar to, I said, I'm going to refer back to that video that I talked about before of the horse that had this generalized anxiety, that was just really off with the fairies. So where do I recommend to begin with these horses? And of course, they might be sick, they might be unwell, they might be, starved, they're not sound, etc. How do I work with these horses? Okay, first of all, I be very firm and clear. Now, I put up a video of a horse, as a grey horse. I'm working at a clinic where I'm doing what I call my forward and backwards and yielding the hindquarters exercise. So what I do is that's a great exercise if you don't have a lot of space to work. You can't do full groundwork. It's a good exercise if you've got a horse that's not 100% sound, but it's a good exercise to get a horse with you, but also what it actually does is it gets the horse to give you some focus, but to also it tunes up the halter responses, which is what you're going to need in these horses. So my ideal thing to do if I take a horse that's very anxious and off its, and really traumatized and really off with the fairies and and really in a bad way. If it's sound, I round pen it. Okay, and I do all that good thing that the round penning does. However, these horses can be unsound and in absolutely no shape or form to do that. So I do my forward and backward exercise, and I've put up that video that shows the first thing is that I work on just getting the horse to go backwards, and sometimes I will get firm with that horse. Okay, if I have to be, I've got to be clear. I've got to be motivating to it. So I teach to back up first, really, really softly, and a good response to the back up. And any kind of negative behavior I get from the horse, I'll back it up. Okay. Then once I get back up really nice and soft, then what I do is I get the horse, I teach to come forward, and then stop when I stop. And if they don't, you'll see in that videos that I give the horse a bump. Okay, and they get their attention. So I go forward and backwards first, and then that's getting the forward and backward response on the halter, and then I get the lateral response on the halter by teaching the yielding the hind end. Okay, and then I basically use those three things to do a bit of a dance with the horse. Will they follow me and follow the feel of me putting on that halter? And I can do some pretty good things with horses that are very stressed and off their face just doing that exercise. So it's a little exercise that I got up my sleeve. It's something that I normally introduce at a clinic. The first thing that I show people that. And especially if I don't have a round pen or something available, I tune up the halter responses, doing my forward, backwards, and yielding the hindquarters. But it's also very, very useful in a situation where the horse might not be 100% sound to be able to do anything, but I need to do a correction. I need to get that horse safe to be able to be handled, to get the help it needs. So with these horses that are in that state and they've come from a bad way, I don't see when I have to get big on them and I have to apply that pressure. And I only apply big pressure to a horse and go up there when I know that's the right thing to do for that horse. I know I've got to set that horse up. I've got to get that horse with me. I've got to get it safe so it can be worked on, and so then I can establish so it's not dangerous. It's not going to do any damage to itself. I get it with me to create that starting point so I can get it on the road to recovery. So that's what I recommend with these particular horses here. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. Okay, put any comments there if you don't, or if you want to know more, etc. But you can check out that little video on the event thing. It's me with a grey horse. And also you can see the horse, that the cane that can be described as generalized anxiety, learned helplessness, really out of sorts, very, very difficult horse, and how I just trained it just in round penning and leading, for a couple of sessions, and how completely different that animal was. Okay, question 5. How am I going for time? Just over 10 minutes left. Okay, so thank you for staying with me. As I said, I can't see the comments, okay, but I will go through them afterwards. And please put your questions there because I will answer and respond. Okay, question 5. Shelley, it would be great to hear about how to work with reactive horses that stem from being stressed, being out of their paddock, changing paddocks, etc., and their reactions being rearing and bucking whilst tired, trying to bolt while being led, and trauma in horses coming off the track. Okay, so the key to this is that you got to start communication with a horse. You got to start it. You got to start with that up front, but be smart. Start where the horse is not being tipped into being overwhelmed. Okay, overwhelmed and over threshold where they just stop thinking. Okay, so sometimes that's going to start in the paddock with the other horses. Now, if you're really smart, set it up. Put them in with a horse that you can easily catch. That's a couple of good horses that you've got good response with, and start the training in there. So you might want to catch the other horses, get someone to hang on to them, and start to say the forward and backwards exercise. That's where I start with those horses. So you can check out that video of me with the grey horses. I'm explaining what I'm doing, and you can see that horse change. In fact, the video, it was pity we didn't get the start, because the start of that video, the horse was separation anxiety. It's just calling out to the other horses. It's trying to run over the top of me. It's really upset. And as you can see, I just tick away. I'm chatting away to the clinic participants, and I'm just asking it simple questions. I'm escalating when I have to get a response. I'm taking myself up, bringing it down, just keeping it casual. I'm ticking away. I'm not reacting what it does with its head or whatever. I'm just ticking away, asking responses. And then I started being a bit strategic when I got responses quite good. I started being strategic, is when that horse kind of looked away and went into la la land. Oh, that's when I asked it another question to get it to stay with me, to stay in this conversation with me. But that's where I start. So I might have to start in the paddock, okay, with another horse. Then there's another photograph that I've put up in the event. You'll see it's a horse being ridden with a horse being held. Now, why had I done that? Because that black horse being worked suffered from separation anxiety. So my thing is I want that horse to learn. So I'm going to put that horse in an environment where it's going to learn, because it's learning that's going to save it. It's learning that's going to make it feel better. So I'm going to put that horse in a state where it's not being necessarily triggered or thrown over threshold, so I can teach it. When I teach a horse and I learn it to connect to me, okay, to start following me. And when that happens, I don't need the backup horse, right? I replace it, okay? So I'm setting it up to learn, so learning can take place, so that horse can switch and connect to me. Because what those horses are doing, and in my separation anxiety course, I talk about this, why they get attached to each other is not that this big friendship bond, it's more than that. It's actually they use each other to filter the changing environment. Okay, the other horses become a filter for them, like a coping mechanism. And so what you've got to do by training is you can switch that filter to become you and not the other horse. So the horse focuses on you. You're okay, it's okay, and that's what you've got to teach them to do. So with those horses that are really difficult, start where they're not difficult. Okay, when they, so they're not over threshold, they're not overwhelmed. Keep them in that safe place. Okay, and then you stretch it out. Now, never tie up a horse that's agitated. Don't even bother doing that. So just say if you've got a horse that's really difficult and gets really worried and being tied up, I will only tie them up if they've gone through round penning, when they're motivated to stand still. And I'll start tying them up to say with another horse, get them good at something when you're not triggering them to be really off their head. And then as I'm introducing it, I make the situation, I give them more and more to cope with, but I'm teaching them how to be tied up first and what that all means. And I'm putting them in a mental state where they're ready to tie up. So as I say to people, if you've got a horse that's been agitated, been tied up, and what I suggest they do, and just say they might not have, they've been at a adjustment center and they've only got their horse, so I say, look, tie your horse up, and it gets agitated, untie it, start doing some groundwork, or put it back in the round pen, work it for a little while, wait till it gets that softness and that calmness about it, take it back, tie it up, okay? And then it gets agitated again, good, take it out again, give it some work, put it back, see how you go. And then I put that horse away, or when it's calm, not when it's being agitated. Okay, so a horse that's bucking or rearing when it's tight, that horse shouldn't be tied up. That's dangerous. Okay, that horse is not in a good place. All as that horse is experiencing is actually flipping into panic and fight and flight, and it's not thinking at all. Nothing's good's coming from that, except the horse will get a really bad negative association with being tied up, and you're just going to teach it to pull back and just be anxious being tied. So it's not ready. Tie horses up when they're mentally ready to do it. Okay, so I hope that helps with that question. Okay, how long have I got? Couple more minutes. Okay. Oh, okay. So I've got a couple of quick ones here that I'll do, and then I promise I'll cover the next ones next week, because I just got so many great questions this time. Actually, I always get great questions. You guys always ask really good questions. Okay, so this one here from Tracy: how do you get your horse relaxed when you take them out and there's no room to trot and canter around on a loose rein? Okay, figure of eights. Figure of eight are are gold. Okay, so if you take it out horse out and you can't do it you normally do, space doesn't allow it, just start walking on a loose rein, those small, now I mean small, 3 to 4 meter little figures of eight circle, And what you're doing is you're getting the horse with you, okay? And so and as I tell people, if you work with me and you get on, and I get you to do the best goddamn figure of eights of your life, and if you work with me, you know that's what I say, okay? You got to ride the best figure of eights of your life. So you got to be present and you got to ride those figures of eight, making sure that you're conscious of your seat and changing the weight on your seat bone as you change, and changing your flexion and all that. You ride a good one and you wait for that horse to get with you. Okay. Now, if the horse wants to jig, jog, or trot, just let it trot. Okay. But just trot these small figures of eight, constantly changing direction. Okay. Riding the best figures of eight as of your life. Okay. And just waiting for them, and you'll see them that they'll start off a little all over the place. But if you just stick with it, keep riding the best figures of eight of your life, they will arrive and they will connect up with you. As long as you made sure you've done your homework at home and you've gone and you've done a lot of testing of other environments and stuff like that, just don't take your horse out anywhere and think you can do that. You got to have your foundation of it behind you. But that's what I do. If you don't have space to do that, to do your nice big trots and loose rein canters, it's your figures of eight. Okay. If you're not riding, then the forward and backward exercise and yielding the hind end on the ground. That's the power exercise on the ground. And also before that, you can go in before that. If you're arriving somewhere where you're going to ride, arrive early. Take your horse for a big long lead. Really lead it around. Let it eat some grass, but lead it. Lead it here, lead it there, lead it everywhere. Okay, until like it arrives and calms down and checks out the environment, because horses might be the most reactive animal on the planet, but they're actually very quick to habituate. If you give them time just to arrive, okay, and don't put any extra pressure on them, and you just allow them to arrive and ask them simple questions like the figure of eight exercise, like the forward and back exercise, that allows them, that's not too much for them and allows them to take in everything. They actually habituate really, really quickly. Okay, you don't actually have to do much by just leave them alone and let them work it out themselves. As long as they're not being kind of dangerous and all over the top of you, there always has to be boundaries for behavior on that. Okay, one last question I think I can fit in before I go is how should you react when you have an aggressive horse that threatens to bite, pin its ears, etc.? It's a little hard to ignore this behavior, and you absolutely shouldn't. Okay, so it depends what it's getting nasty about. So food aggression, I have talked about that before, but if a horse threatens to bite, pins its ears, like I'll drive it. Okay, there's a consequence to that, a massive consequence to that. But I'm smart about it. I work out what's actually triggering that horse. Okay, and a horse will always give you a hell of a lot of warning that it's thinking negatively about those things. It just doesn't bite. Okay, so the trick is to keep it safe, is work out what's triggering them. Okay, set it up or make changes to stop it being a trigger. Okay, make changes, but also watch when they, watch what they actually do before they do get aggressive. So just say, for instance, I remember a horse that was a really terrible bucker under saddle. Okay, and we worked through all the groundwork. The horse went really, really well. The rider was really nervous, about, because there's sometimes you can only fix so much on the ground, and we'd fixed a hell of a lot, but the horse was still had a trigger of being ridden and bucking. And I said, don't worry, the horse is not going to buck. We're not going to wait for it to buck. He's going to tell us way before he actually bucks, and we just have to deal with that. And this horse would just bend its ear a little funny, right? Before he did, and when his thoughts changed to negative, when he got triggered to perform his evasion of bucking. So all as we did, we waited for the ear, and then we instigated the treatment that we did to stop him from bucking. So we didn't have to wait for him to buck, and you don't have to wait for them to bite or to lash out or do anything or pin their ears. They'll tell you. They can see. If you're clever and if you're observant, you get in there and you correct that negative thought. Don't wait for it to turn into a behavior. Okay, so be smart, set it up. When does it happen? Okay, and set it all up so you can put a consequence on that. So horses that are food aggressive, I go into the paddock, and I have I train them, make sure it's a nice safe paddock, and I take whip in with me, and I put the food down and I drive them away. Before actually even I put the food down, I teach them to go down the end of their paddock on a cue, down the end of the paddock on a cue. Okay, I get that really good, and then I put the food in. Okay, and I will not walk away from that food unless they are walking away from me or standing stock still. Okay, and that's how I remove that kind of aggressive behavior, is I teach them something. Okay, teach them. So there's a really famous quote out there about, don't worry about what a horse is doing that you don't like. What do you want them to do, and teach them to do that. Okay, so focus on that, and that's how you can correct. However, when it comes to like behavior like that, don't wait for them to bite or pin their ears. Wait for their thought to change, and you'll be able to see it and correct that. Okay, guys, so I'm very sorry. Good old comments didn't work again. Slowly but surely, hopefully one day I'll work out